Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to such an exciting event for women in Homeland Security, and that is the launch of Admiral Stowes' new book, and first book, isn't that right?
Yes, the very
Yes,
first.
yes. So we're very, very excited to welcome her today and to be part of this historic launch. Admiral Stowes is truly a mentor of mine and certainly one of the people I admire most. So it is just great to have her wisdom written down for everyone to read. And she's also joined Homeland Security today as a columnist. So we've been getting her wisdom on a weekly basis in the Coast Guard newsletter and certainly posting it in the leadership section of Homeland Security today. So that's been really exciting. It's great to have women in Homeland Security back again. I hope all of you followed our interviews during Women's History Month with many of the female leaders across the Department of Homeland Security, FBI, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. Those are all, again, available on Homeland Security Today. It was a partnership with Women in Homeland Security, featuring a lot of the amazing women making history right now. So just wanted to get a few little housekeeping things out of the way. Working with Admiral Stowes, many of you know her leadership is very collaborative and interactive, and she wants this launch to be the same way. So we got a lot of tremendous questions ahead of time, but we really invite you and encourage you to put your questions in the Q&A chat box, and we'll be kind of going back and forth between questions submitted and then those that are coming up. And the Admiral will do a brief intro, so some of your questions might be answered there, and so if they don't get asked, they were probably answered anyway, but we'll do everything in our power to answer all of them. So the other thing, I know you're all just on the edge of your seats, and that is the free book. So the winner of the free book will be announced at the end of our webinar, because we want you to stay and listen to everything. And we also really encourage you to download the book today or purchase it today. That really helps the Admiral with stats and things with Amazon and all the places that matter. So if you were thinking about buying it, if you haven't bought it yet, certainly take a moment and do that today. We sent you an email on how to do that. So with that, I'd love to introduce Admiral Stowes. She started in the U.S. Coast Guard as an ensign, serving on polar icebreakers, which we're hearing a lot about those in this flat budget, but that's another webinar. Conducting national security missions from the Arctic to the Antarctic. Her 40-year career is filled with leadership lessons gleaned while breaking ice and breaking glass. That's the name of the book. As the first woman to command an icebreaker on the Great Lakes and to lead a U.S. Armed Forces Service Academy. Along the way, she served 12 years at sea, commanding 2 ships, and led large Coast Guard organizations during times of crisis and complexity. She finished her career as the first woman assigned as Deputy Commandant for Mission Support, directing one of the Coast Guard's largest enterprises. She's lectured widely on leadership and has been featured on C-SPAN and other media outlets. In 2012, Newsweek's The Daily Beast named the Admiral to their list of 150 women who shape the world. She's on the editorial board of Homeland Security Today and a strategic advisor to the Government Technology and Services Coalition. With that, I will turn it over to you, Admiral, to tell us a little bit more about your book.
Thank you very much, Christina, and good afternoon, everyone. I will tell you, it's really strange doing these webinars because you're looking at a blank screen. I wish I could see everybody out there and wave and thank you in person, but I want to thank everybody who registered and zoomed in today to celebrate with us as we launch Breaking Ice and Breaking Glass, Leading in Uncharted Waters. And can you believe we had over 250 registrants? I am truly honored by your presence. Your support means so much to me as a new author. And take it from me as a cutterman who spent 12 years at sea. Navigating down a narrow channel on a ship is nothing compared to navigating the uncharted waters of the book writing and publishing process. Well, here's how to support the launch today. As Christina was saying, she sent out a great media kit that gives you all the information. But please, if you want to buy the book, download it today. You can get it in hardcover, softcover, e-version, and that's all available from Amazon, the big guys, to the smaller book publishers. It's all on my website at www.sandrastowes.com on the book tab. And today's the day to do it because it helps with the Amazon bestseller rankings. And then that just gives me a chance to have more sales. And the reason I would like to get good sales is to have to pass on my leadership lessons, but all proceeds are being donated to the Coast Guard Academy Institute for Leadership. And that's going to go back to develop the next generation of leaders of character, which is really another way of giving back. So we have an hour block for this session today. I'm going to take the first 10 to 15 minutes to do 4 things: thank my supporters, talk about why I wrote the book, tell you a little bit about the book, and then tell you just a little bit about my story, because much of that will come out with the questions. And thanks to those who sent in questions in advance, they're really good ones. And then after that, I'll turn it over to Christina to start that Q&A. And that's much more engaging and personal. I encourage people to continue to ask more questions on the chat, and we'll alternate between the questions that came in first and those on the chat. So let's get started. So thank you to the Women in Homeland Security and Homeland Security Today, who generously sponsored my book launch. They also published my weekly blog, Leading with Character, which you can subscribe to on my website. And Christina and her team are just powerhouses of productivity and connecting people, businesses, and government agencies in support of a more secure homeland. I know not all of you know what they do. So just a really good group of people doing good job for the country. And I wouldn't be here today without my many, many supporters. You know, I'll just name a few because it just is worth it. A book launch is to celebrate, and you can't really celebrate without thanking. I really want to thank my sister-in-law, Lynn, for helping me get started. She kind of prodded me after I retired in 2018. I had the mission to write the book, but a couple of months went by and Lynn said, "Hey, Sandy, when are you going to start that book? And can I help you sketch it out?" And then readers that helped read chapters and give me feedback. Readers, friends like Camilla Bosanquet and Sandy Bashu, just to name a few. My mom, Joy, my brother, Mark, and many, many others. Advisors and mentors along the way. I've made hundreds of new friends through this process who've guided me. Generous endorsers like General Jim Mattis, Secretary Jay Johnson, authors like Marshall Goldsmith, Jim Kouzes, Don Phillips, and many more. I'm so honored that those people, mentors, readers, friends, endorsers, took the time to help me, a new author, to navigate those uncharted waters. And my publisher, Kohler Books, and his team have been super. And maybe most of all, Secretary Sam Skinner, who was our service secretary in transportation when the Coast Guard fell under that department, and I was his military aide back in the late 1980s. So Secretary Sam Skinner and the Skinner team, who supported me for over 30 years in this book writing endeavor. So why did I write this book? I wrote this book to give back leadership lessons learned during my 40-year journey with the U.S. Coast Guard, from cadet to admiral. And the Coast Guard made me, a shy and unconfident young woman, maybe still a little bit that way today, made me a leader by pushing me to what I thought were my limits and then beyond, because you never really know what your limits are until you're pushed beyond what you think you can do. And as with mentoring, I feel like I got a lot more from the Coast Guard than what I gave. And I gave a lot, but I feel like I got a lot more back. And I want to help others succeed in achieving their full potential, just like I was able to have that opportunity. And I'll tell you a little bit of a story here about why I wrote the book. So back during those days with Secretary Skinner in 1989, I was working with a group of really amazing people that he had brought in as part of his team. And one of them was Shane, a young woman about my age who was brought on for the advance team, to help plan the secretary's trips. And she and I got to talking because we worked together a lot. And I was telling her about my career, which up to date had been a bunch of icebreakers, sailing from the Arctic to the Antarctic, and I'll get into more of that later, and having been the first woman this or that, and what a great opportunity we both had as young people to be working for the secretary and looking at the whole of government and having that opportunity to look down and how all the pieces fit together. And Shane looked at me. I told her, I need to write a book about this, Shane, to give back some of the leadership I'm learning. She looked at me and said, Sandy, you have to call that book Breaking Ice and Breaking Glass. That was 32 years ago that the title of the book came about. So that's kind of the story of why I wrote the book and a little bit of how it happened. And what is the book about? Well, the title does say a lot, as Christina mentioned. Breaking Ice and Breaking Glass, Leading in Uncharted Waters. That's the story of my journey from entering the service at the Coast Guard Academy, and one of the first classes to include women. I was in the third class, to be specific. Then upon graduation and after commissioning, I served for 3 years aboard polar icebreakers. And for those of you in the know, they were the Glacier and the Polar Star. And we sailed from the Arctic to the Antarctic on missions, national security missions, scientific missions, search and rescue, law enforcement. And I found myself breaking ice and breaking glass all 40 years in the Coast Guard. And I thought when I first started, surely I'll be able to outrun this being the first. Because like many people who are a little different, maybe compared to the majority, I just wanted to be another Coast Guard person. I didn't want to be a woman, a sailor, a woman in the Coast Guard. I wanted to be a Coast Guard person, known first and foremost for that, not, yeah, you're a woman. Well, I couldn't outrun being the first, because in the Coast Guard, you advance along according to your time and grade, and you don't get ahead really at all. So when I wasn't literally breaking ice, I was figuratively breaking ice as the first or only woman at many of my units, including 6 different ships. So hence the title. And through personal stories derived from my unique experiences, I hope to teach leaders how to find and then become an inspiring mentor, to implement effective diversity, inclusion, and equity programs, and to successfully lead in an ever-changing environment, and a lot more in the book, but just in a basic summary. And a little bit about, just a little tiny bit about my story, and then I'll turn it over to Christina, because of course the story could take a whole book to tell. But I think it's important for people who are trying to tell a story to start where it began, with childhood, because so much is formed in childhood. And my story does start before I entered the Coast Guard. The character and core values I learned in those childhood years enabled me to overcome the challenges and ultimately succeed at the Coast Guard Academy. So I was prepared in advance before I faced the rigors that I was going to face in the Coast Guard. And I was raised as the eldest of 4 children with 3 brothers. So I think that really helped. I never minimized the impact of what that had, having already been used to a male dominated life as a child. If it was going to be a vote, what TV program to watch, it was going to be a Western and we're going to play football in the backyard, because I was in the minority as a girl with 3 brothers. And my parents treated us kids all the same. We participated in sports together. We hiked as a family. My dad bought us kids a joint, a common shotgun and 22 rifle that we could use to learn how to shoot. And we all had jobs as teenagers. There was high expectations. And in the summer, starting at age 13, I would go up. I was born and raised in Ellicott City, Maryland. I would travel up to visit my grandparents on a farm in Amherst, Massachusetts, and I would do farm work. I picked cucumbers one year, and then from there on, for the next several years, I sowed tobacco in the fields for Consolidated Cigar Corporation, of all things. And it was hot, sweaty, and grimy work, and you had to make a quota every day or you'd be fired. So I learned the value of hard work and perseverance, and of doing more than what was expected, because there's a reward. And of course, it wasn't a monetary reward for achieving piecework above the quota, but it set a tone for me that the system, whatever it is in life, rewards those who work hard and actually put out more than what's expected. So as a reward for that hard work, I'd spend a couple of weeks with my other set of grandparents who owned a home on the water on Cape Cod. And there I developed a love for the ocean. And I think that helped set me up, way in advance before I even knew any different, for my time in the Coast Guard, to have had that experience, just association with the water and kind of having a dream of being out on it someday, but not having the means. And during childhood, my core values that I learned through those experiences, to sum them up, were hard work, perseverance, honesty, and humility. And later in the Coast Guard, I internalized the service's core values of honor, respect, and devotion to duty. So I say this, the childhood lessons I learned on character and core values, they were all formed back then. And it's important because looking back now, after the 40 years in the Coast Guard, of all the leadership lessons I learned over the course of my career, the most significant is the importance of the core values and the character they build. And your character defines you. You are who you are, how you act, and you have to believe in yourself if you're going to do the right thing always. So I think that is so fundamental. It almost is simple, but it is at the essence of what I believe is the foundation of every leader. So I go back to it being the foundational leadership lesson that I learned in childhood that carried me through to success throughout my career. And I didn't start out knowing that. It's the wisdom from looking back on an accumulated 40 years of experience. And I started out as a shy, quiet young girl, lacking the self-confidence. Believe it or not, being raised with those three brothers, I still had that background. It was just my personality. And so I had to learn to deal with my personality if I was going to achieve goals, because I had high goals. My parents had set high expectations. I wanted to do the best I could do. I sometimes just didn't have the confidence or know how to present myself with that confidence. And even after the academy, that followed me through to my first ship, the Glacier. And I'll tell this one quick story and then turn it over to Christina. When I reported aboard the icebreaker, the polar icebreaker Glacier, in the summer of 1982, after being commissioned as an officer, it was a ship of 300 feet, 220 crew. There were about 20 women, and most of them were enlisted. There were two of us officers. It was a ship where the Coast Guard had tried to provide a critical mass of women, even knowing back in those days that it was important to have more than just one or two if you could do it. And the Coast Guard made a good faith effort to get a number of women on that ship. But it was still hard being one of just two female junior officers. I was a deck watch officer, which meant I was learning how to drive the ship. That would be my primary duty. And my boss was a guy who just thought that I needed to be this confident person who stood on the bridge and barked orders. In fact, as the patrol went on, as we sailed south to Antarctica, which is the direction we were heading when I first reported aboard, going across the South Pacific, the equator, and into the ice, we were going along, and days had gone by. I was being broken in on this watch under very competent people who had been qualified already, other deck watch officers. And I wasn't qualifying, but they were all recommending me. So I sat down with my boss and asked him, how come I'm not getting my qualification letter from the captain? And he told me, well, he said, there's just something missing. And I says, well, what is it? I've met all the qualifications. And he said, I'm not going to feel comfortable qualifying you until you stand on the bridge with a 6-gun in each hand, like John Wayne, barking orders. And for those who don't know John Wayne, he was a Western hero back in the day, many years ago. And I listened to that and I thought, okay, I've got to learn how to be John Wayne. I've got to learn how to turn from being who I am, my genuine self, into being this new person who barks orders. And it didn't work. So I tried to be John Wayne for a little bit, didn't work. But what it did do was it instilled in me a realization that I needed to be confident in who I was. And my leadership style being a more quiet leadership style, asking people to do their job instead of having to bark an order at them. And once I started to feel more confident with myself, amazingly, my boss sensed that. I came off as more confident and I got qualified. That was a huge life lesson for me on my first ship as an ensign. And I learned how to use my difference, not as a handicap, but as a powerful tool. And I'll conclude by saying that every one of you in the audience and those you mentor and those of you who are mentees, you're going to face times when you find yourself leading in uncharted waters, in an uncomfortable, uncertain, unknown position, a crisis, a COVID situation. There's going to be something, writing a new book. This book is going to provide tools and models to help you prepare to meet those challenges, regardless of what they might be. And with that, as a brief introduction to hopefully spur some questions, I'm going to turn it back over to Christina to have our more engaged Q&A session, and look forward to those questions.
Great. Well, the first one you've already answered, and that was how you started your journey into finding your voice to lead. So that was a great intro. But there's a second one, and you touched on it a little bit, but even I would love to hear more about it because I've been a proponent and advocate of it for a long time. And that is the concept of integrating common female styles of leadership in predominantly male dominated fields. So it goes to your story, but I've noticed that it's a very necessary skill across
Mhm.
everything. And so just because we lead differently doesn't mean we don't lead to the right place. So over to you.
Absolutely. That's a great question. I loved it when I saw that one. And for one thing, I will start out by saying, I'm just looking at my notes here. I will start out by saying that don't paint a broad brush across women as all the same. Just, a little note there, because we're not. There are women who don't necessarily demonstrate the same leadership characteristics. So we are all different, just like men are all different. And there's, quite frankly, some men who share leadership characteristics that people might associate more with women, whatever that might be. So that's what I would say is don't. That's one thing I got sick of in the Coast Guard was people painting a broad brush. And I remember on many occasions, well-intentioned senior supervisors asking me, or getting the two women who might have been in this big work group, hey, we need to ask you two what you think about this, because, and the idea being, if they could ask Sandy what she thought about it, I would be representing 1,000 women in the Coast Guard. And they couldn't be more wrong. I'm one voice, right? And just because I happen to be a female doesn't mean I represent every woman in the Coast Guard. So please understand that. But all that said, I read one of my favorite books is a book by Sally Helgeson. She's a famous author. How Women Rise is her book. And she talks about 12 traps that can fall upon women with the way they lead or how they are wired. And two of them are just, to give you a couple is, where I put this, the perfection trap and the disease to please. And I looked at some of these 12 and I'm like, oh my gosh, there I am trying to be too perfect. There's a little ditty that goes that if a woman is looking at a job offering and a man's looking at the same job offering, the woman will make sure she meets all the criteria on that application before she submits it, has the confidence to submit it. And the man, if he can answer a few questions on there, plink, off he goes to submit that thing. And so the women, we're our own worst enemies sometimes. So don't always blame men for holding you back. So I think that there are some common female styles because I can resonate with some of those. And how do you deal with that then if you're a woman, or if you're a man? If you're a woman, it does you good to understand that there's those differences. And like I said, don't blame men if you're not confident enough in yourself. On the other hand, there's the men who all want to support us, a lot of them, because we all have brothers, fathers, sons. We all have men in our lives, if we're women, who want to support us, but they don't always know how. So help them to understand how. And you know how you do both those things, the two-way? You communicate. So I don't know how many times I've talked to somebody, and I bet you people in the audience could nod their heads. You ask them about how you can help them solve their problem because they come to you, they want to solve a problem. And you're like, well, have you talked to the person about it? Well, no. Well, if you don't sit down and have a straightforward conversation, you're not going to understand each other. So I think how I would answer this question, which is really more of a comment, is seek with curiosity and respect. Seek with curiosity and respect to understand the other person, not to undermine them or to think poorly of them, and ask questions about how you can form a relationship and move forward in support of a common goal. Because if you're in a workplace, you're in support of a common goal. It's a goal you're trying to achieve as a team, or it's a mission as an organization. And the Coast Guard, oh my goodness, what a wonderful mission. It should really bond us together. And most of our workplaces, and for anybody who's logged onto this webinar, has a mission that should bond people together in unity, not divide them by differences in the office, in personality styles and leadership styles. Please communicate with respect and curiosity to learn more about the person who's your peer, who's your supervisor, or your junior, your subordinate. And I think that will take care of a lot of those challenges.
Excellent. We have another question about how you ended up serving confidently in your role when others may not have supported you or doubted your capabilities and unique contributions.
How did I serve in my role when others might have doubted me? I think that I talked about the glacier when that boss doubted me. And maybe this is the time for another story. And I did a blog on this, a Leading with Character blog. But yeah, I had a lot of doubt. And that came from misunderstanding. So you have male bosses, and I was one of the first women to come into the academy, third class. So I was early on. So some of these stories happened a long time ago and things have changed. But in 1990, I reported aboard the Coast Guard cutter Katmai Bay in Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan. And I had been Secretary Skinner's military aide. So I told you that story already. And I was really naive. And so Mr. Skinner said, hey, I'm going to go to your change of command on the Katmai Bay. And I'm like, wow, that's great. And he flew in. He actually flew the jet because he was very proud of being able to fly the FAA Citation Super 2. He flew in and landed in Sault Ste. Marie and came to my change of command. And this is a big deal for those of you who know or in the know, which I wasn't when I was that junior, that a secretary would come to a lieutenant change of command up in Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan. So it made my boss was just angry because even senior people don't get the secretary to come. So instead of celebrating that a junior person, that this attention was brought to this little outpost in the Sioux, it was instead, we're going to get back at you. So the first thing he said to me after the whole ceremony was over and there was a chance that he caught me aside, he said, you're just a secretary's fair-haired golden girl. We'll see how long you last. I was reporting in as commanding officer of this ship. And first woman ever to command a ship on the Great Lakes, I think even in the merchant fleet. So already, maybe feeling a little pressure. And then a boss who doesn't believe in you. In fact, not only quietly doesn't believe in you, but makes it a mission to see if how long you can last under his scrutiny. That was miserable. And I got through it because I had allies on the ship, enlisted people who believed in me when my boss didn't, and who stood up for me and went into my boss, one of them, Chief Petty Officer Dave Foley, if he's listening, went into that captain's office, a big rank difference there, and asked the captain to back off on picking on me because it was interfering with the good order and discipline on the crew, because they're all trying to do the mission, adapt to a new commanding officer, adapt to all the publicity of being the first woman, which was in the news and everything. And nobody asked for this attention. I was trying to outrun being the first and I could never get past it. So yeah, I dealt with it by finding allies. And this ally stepped forward. I was too tunnel vision to even know enough to look for allies and to ask for help. So I would offer people should ask for help and try to find allies. And it goes back to the first thing I said, how important it is to believe in yourself. If you can't believe in yourself, it becomes hard to survive and cope when you are facing adversity in the form of people who don't believe in you. If you don't even believe in yourself, it's easy to knock you down. So that's how I would answer that. But the funny thing is, I couldn't escape this. So it wasn't just back in 1990 when it was old times and the Coast Guard's changed. The Coast Guard's changed a lot. But I was superintendent of the Coast Guard Academy, and this is 2011 or 11. I just relieved and took over the job. It was the first homecoming football game and the 50-year reunion class. So you can do the math on how old these gentlemen were, all men. One of them, we're at the football game and one of them is in the bleachers. And I'm going around the bleachers, like talking to different fans and everything and being personable. And then there's a goal, the Coast Guard Academy scores. So the cadets all go down and do 7 push-ups for the touchdown. And I went down with the cadets to do the push-ups, and I got up, and there's this old guy looking at me, one of the 50-year class. He looks at me and he snarls his face up and he says, "Well, it's a big job you got there. You think you're up to it?" Being superintendent. And this is in front of everybody. And so I just shook it off and said, "Yeah, I'm doing my best I can. It is a big job and I'm honored to have it." And I went about my business. and that was, you just can't outrun some of the stuff. And that guy was older and he wasn't part of the Coast Guard. He was an alumni. But even if the service has changed, you still face some of those problems in society. So you have to have prepared yourself for those encounters and have the inner strength and the self-confidence to persevere beyond them. And I know it sounds easy and people say, well, you shouldn't have to deal with that. Yeah, you shouldn't, but you do. And it's life. So you have to develop mechanisms to succeed. And that's how I got by. I didn't get by blaming somebody else or seeing the glass as half empty and draining, or when the two wolves are fighting and one's the good wolf and one's the bad wolf. I didn't feed the bad wolf. I fed the good wolf. I looked for the positive, and that's how I succeeded to rise up through the ranks.
That's excellent. So in addition to questions, we also have a lot of admirers of yours in the audience. So I will read to you from Kurt Tidd. Terrific book, terrific message, and thank you for leading with courage and character. You opened the doors for so many who have served and are continuing to follow in your wake. As a proud Coast Guard dad, I want to personally thank you for establishing what the right kind of leadership looks like. Go Bears! I don't know what that means, but I'm sure you do.
Okay, so Kurt's daughter, Jackie, just graduated from the Coast Guard Academy, and she's southbound and down to Puerto Rico to serve on a fast response cutter as a young ensign. I'm so proud of her. So that's a great thing. And Kurt retired as a 4-star Navy Admiral, a very good friend of mine. So thanks, Kurt. And I'm going to go to one of the questions online here. I see a chat from my friend Bob Acker. And he says, Sandy, can you briefly talk about how the Coast Guard mission of life-saving that we all shared, regardless of professional area, motivated you to become a servant leader? Yeah, so I think that my experience with recruits, and I will say, of all the things I am proud of being the first at, there's only one that I'm really proud of being the first at. I don't mean that in a bad way. That was that I was the first woman to command, the first person, not the first woman, first person to command both the Coast Guard's boot camp at Cape May, the Coast Guard Recruit Training Center, and the Coast Guard Academy. So the accession sources for enlisted and officer. I love young people. So all young people join the Coast Guard in part because they want to save lives, and that mission of life-saving, that really is a common mission, and it goes back to in the history of the Coast Guard. But it certainly was an inspiration to me. I wanted to be able to, I like the idea of being a multi-mission, being part of a multi-mission organization, and it fit my personality. I was always what I called a self-styled jack of all trades and master of none. I was never the smartest, fastest, biggest, brightest, but I was a jack of all trades. And I found my niche that way because I could kind of be all things to what was needed at the time. So I liked a multi-mission Coast Guard, which was maritime, military, multi-mission, which had life-saving, law enforcement, polar operations, defense, all those missions. I could go on and on with the Coast Guard's missions. So I think that life-saving really is a common bond for us, Bob, and that's a really good point. It helps make you instills that service first. So the Coast Guard, I don't ascribe to authentic leadership or agile leadership or other kinds of leadership, but I do ascribe, or I resonate with one kind of leadership that's a moniker, and that's servant leadership. And I think that goes back to that life-saving ethos, is where we're built, hardwired in the Coast Guard to serve. So thanks for that question, Bob. I think it's important. Christina, back to you for the next question.
All right. What are you most proud of as you look back at your history of contributions? And what has been the largest growth area for you personally?
So I'm going to talk about my biggest accomplishment, which is relative and subject to debate. But I'll give one in the, I think that I have to say no for this one. I'm just going to stick with the personnel side. So I think the biggest contributions and things that I'm proud of are my work with younger people. And I talked about the training center at Cape May boot camp and the Coast Guard Academy. And I will give a little tiny story of the deep kind of satisfaction. So there's things that make you feel good, like you've just done a search and rescue case and you are so thankful to have saved somebody. Have we all had that in the Coast Guard? Yes. But a deeper satisfaction to me are things that involve people. I'll give you an example. I was at the Coast Guard Academy and we had a young cadet. And I'm going to call him out because I think I saw a note from his mom that was going to join today. And his name was Darian Duryea. And he was a cadet at the Coast Guard Academy, recruited swimmer, very, very good swimmer. And but he wasn't a calculus guy. And I'm like, I can relate to that because I was scooting along at a 2.0 at the Coast Guard Academy for a while, hoping that I wouldn't get disenrolled for academic deficiency because of calculus. So I can relate to anybody who's got a math challenge, and Darian didn't have the top math skills, right? So despite our best efforts to retain him, we had to disenroll him, but he had a passion for the Coast Guard, for search and rescue, life-saving, to go back to what Bob Acker, the question he just submitted. And I said, well, Darian, let's get you to a pathway where you can stay in the Coast Guard and serve, even if it's not as a cadet at the academy. There's other ways to serve. This is just one. And so we talked about enlistment. And I went back to the Coast Guard Personnel Command at headquarters, and I was superintendent of the academy at the time. And they said, oh no, we can't take a cadet who hasn't made it as a cadet and put them into the enlisted corps. And I'm like, well, you got to be kidding me. There can't be a pathway where somebody can have different options and try one. And if that's not the right one, find a different path until they find the right path. Nope, can't do it. Well, we kept pushing and pushing and pushing. And I got a special exception for this one case for Darian to go to boot camp and start over again, having done already the SWAB summer boot camp as a cadet and going through over a year. He started over again at boot camp. And you know what? He graduated #1 in his boot camp class. And you know what next? He went and applied to be a rescue swimmer. And you know how the percentage of them who succeed is like 10%. He graduated #1 in his class as a rescue swimmer. And I went down and had the honor of being there to be at his ceremony for when he was promoted to rescue swimmer 3rd class, when he graduated from rescue swimmer school. And what an accomplishment for Darian, but what a deep sense of reward for me, because we helped an individual find his full potential. And then the Coast Guard had an awakening that there might be another pathway that made sense, right? So thanks for the chance to share that story, because it really mattered a lot to me. And Christina, should I go to another question then online?
Well, I have one. When you experienced a failure or a setback, what did you do to tell yourself to keep you focused and get back on track?
You want to ask me all the hard questions, and I want to
I do.
I see a question on here about Antarctica.
Yeah, well, you already answered it, he said.
So anyway, this too will pass. And probably more than one of us online has heard the saying, this too will PCS. One of my toughest moments in my career, and it was that Katmai Bay story I just told you. We all know that permanent change of station in the military is PCS. And we kind of use it as a verb. I'm going to PCS to Sault Ste. Marie. And so I started thinking about tough times in life as this too will PCS, this too will pass, because you will either change and move on, and or your boss or the peer that you're having a hard time with will change station and move on. And I know this isn't true for civilians necessarily, but it was a coping mechanism for me, because most of the most trying times in the Coast Guard, all of them, were people-oriented, were working for a boss who was excruciatingly challenging. And I had to find a way to endure and persevere through that. And you know what? There's a question later on, Christina, that you might get to, but if you don't, it's like the last question or something. Would you change anything about your career? And I will tell you one thing to the audience. It sounds really crazy, but I learned more from the bad leaders that I had than the good ones. And I think it might be, and all credit to the good leaders, and I had great leaders. It's probably, you take it for granted. Oh, this is a super leader that I got, you take it for granted. But the bad leaders or the not good leaders, I learned so much more, so much more. I internalized it so much more. I will never do this. If I get through this and get senior, I'll never treat another person like this. In fact, here's all the ways that I will treat people that's completely the opposite from what this guy is doing to me. So I'd encourage any of those who are having a tough time at work with a boss that, first of all, maybe this too will PCS, this too will pass, or you're going to learn a lot from that. And you need to persevere, because every single one of those bosses retired and I was still standing. And I didn't know that when I was young. It was overwhelming, the first bad boss. But looking back, I'm like, oh my gosh, when I was like a mid-career officer, I almost quit and had my resignation letter in twice, by the way. I almost quit. Oh, not submitted, written, sitting there on the shelf, ready service locker, ready to pull. If I had submitted that letter, that guy would have won. Who wants to give victory to somebody who's picking on you? So I denied them victory. And I, in fact, ended up the victor, not the victim. And that's a big message that I have for anyone who listens to me long enough.
That's an excellent message. So, has the practice of after action review and reports been applied to evolving the USCG culture as workforce issues have received more leadership focus and support? And how has the Coast Guard learned from its own experience to create breakthroughs in the human domain?
Good question. Somebody really put some good thought into that. I will answer it, maybe not directly, not to avoid it, but I was with the Coast Guard 40 years, and I'm here to tell anybody, and this is my story. Nobody can challenge me on it, because you'd be surprised at the people who challenge you on your own story, because they don't want to hear it. They want to hear about how bad things are. You go back 40 years in the Coast Guard when I came in, and things were a certain way as far as, women and minorities. Advanced 40 years, so much has changed. So much is better. The Coast Guard has advanced so much. We've applied the after action. We've learned from our trials and errors and our mistakes. And we seesawed up and down the mountain trying to get this thing right. And I've got a story where I, as one of the first women, was singled out for opportunities that my male counterparts weren't offered ahead of time, beneath the radar, without telling anybody. And I didn't want an unfair advantage. I just wanted an equal opportunity. So we've tried everything over the years, and we've advanced on a scale like this, going up in how we treat and how we provide for and incorporate and include women and minorities. But is there still work to do? Yeah. And we do learn from our after action reports. We've hired RAND to do women in the workplace study. When I was still on active duty, we were doing that. Results were published last year. We're doing a minority study with RAND on how we can do better, but we have improved so much. And I think it's important to know that you don't turn a big ship going down a channel all at once. It is very small course corrections to get to someplace. And that's okay, as long as people are told that. So, and people get sick of hearing that. It's a very tough, complicated problem. And organizations that are big and have culture and core values and all that, it is hard to change. And so leaders need to encourage change. And I don't have time to get into that right now. Some of that's in my book. But I'm kind of answering the question a little bit of a roundabout way. Yes, we use after action reports, which are very useful at sea in fixing the next evolution to avoid any mistakes you've made. But is it as fast as we would like so that we have a fully equitable environment? No, we're not there yet. But is it more hopeful than not? Is the glass filling up? Yes, the glass is not coming down, everybody. And by listening to some of the talk out there, you'd think that the glass is plummeting down anywhere you go in society, not the Coast Guard, but anywhere. And the glass is filling up, and we just need to feed the good wolf. If you feed the bad wolf, you're just going to be constantly, the water is going to be draining out of your glass as it goes half half full to nothing. And be part of the solution instead of complaining. And you can do that by starting with yourself and adjusting and adapting your attitude, not expecting every single thing to be adjusted or adapted from the organization down to meet your individual needs when there's 40,000, 80,000 people on the Coast Guard, however you look at it, different cohorts. Do your part to be part of the solution instead of just complaining.
That's excellent advice.
And can I go through these questions on Antarctica now?
You want to do that one? Okay, fine. But then I have another one. Go for it.
Oh, I know. Let me see. Okay, so this is from Walter. I was attached to support ASA Support Antarctica during deep freeze 62. And in those days, man, I was on deep freeze 83, Walter. In those days, you were not aboard. Oh, I was not aboard Glacier, which I visited during my shore tour. Even then, I was amazed at the engineering spirit of the crew that was dealing with the aging icebreaker. How did you handle major maintenance problems on the Glacier when you were qualifying for watch? Yikes. When I sailed on the Glacier, it was the last trip south in 1982 for deep freeze 83, the last trip south before she went into a major maintenance availability. I reported aboard in September, and she sailed 3 weeks later for Antarctica. The engineers all had a ski trip to Lake Tahoe planned for that year. We were stationed in Long Beach, California. They all had a ski trip planned. They were so sure we weren't going to sail this tin can down, rust bucket down to Antarctica. We had 10 main diesel engines, conventional diesel plant, and only 3, 4 of them could be brought online at any one time. Of the 2 ship stores diesel generators, only one of them worked. We had an emergency diesel generator. We sailed that ship. We didn't have the same protocols in place that we do now in mission support that would not allow a commanding officer to make that high risk decision. So we sailed south, and I remember going across the equator, everybody sleeping on deck, 300-foot ship, and you had Douglas fir decks. People were all up there in their blankets. And looking down from the bridge, I remember it looked like a nuclear explosion had happened, because just bundles of people in blankets at nighttime when you're standing in the midwatch or something, because no AC down below, 120 degrees in deck berthing. And you only could use running lights. I mean, there was so little electricity, you couldn't power things. We got to New Zealand and spent a month and a half there because the one generator we did have broke. We had to order one from Australia and had to chug across the ocean to get to New Zealand. And we had to bolt that down on the 01 weather deck, sail into the ice. We had some storms where we hurt people. Somebody broke their back, another broke their leg, getting thrown off the helm, had to be medevaced. It was terrible. And it was an amazing experience for a young woman, young officer to see. It was very hard. And I don't think we should have taken that risk, especially on the heels of the west wind, having been crushed up against the ice shelf years earlier. So no, I'm sorry. I don't, for those who are in the know, that west wind might have happened afterwards. Don't quote me on that, but it's dangerous down there. So that's my answer to the Antarctica question. Thanks for the chance to tell a sea story.
Excellent. Okay, so I have another toughie. What surprised you most about encountering other women at your level of rank or service?
I didn't really have many women above me, because getting back to this thing about being one of the first women. So I think that it's challenging when you're among the first of something, whether it's women or maybe it's the same for minorities, but there's competition there. In the early days, women weren't reaching out their hand to help each other. I'm all about reaching out your hand, meet them where they are, and help somebody to succeed. And people were competing, women with each other. So I would much rather work with the men than the women. I think that's changed too. I think women are much more collaborative now. I didn't have women peers much to speak of as a senior person. So I don't have a lot of experience with that. In the early days, things change, but that was my experience earlier on. Later on, I think that things even out and people are looked at more and more and more. In my eyes, as I got more and more senior, I was looked at as what I brought to the table for skill sets and other kinds of diversity, cognitive diversity, how I thought, than for what I look like. whether it was my skin color or my gender or whatever it might be. So I think that those things are all evening out, to answer your question there.
Excellent. Well, I'll give you an easy technical one then. We have one from a veteran U.S. Navy radioman who was on the USS Coral Sea CV-43. And they're asking, how does a USCG vessel maintain communications emergency response within adversary hostile environments, sailing alone with little or no backup US vessels in the operating area? Is that an easier one?
Yeah, that's a good question. And one thing I will say is, there's anybody who's on here who's an active duty cutterman right now is far above me and as far as what's going on with technology on our ships now. But an interesting thing I want to point out, what makes, I think, the Coast Guard so exceptional as far as leadership development goes, is that we do steam in single formation. We don't generally steam with the Navy in a task force. So yes, we have independent operations that don't rely on somebody else in the task force putting down the order. It's a lot of your own agency as a commanding officer on what you're going to do, and decision-making authority vested down to the lowest levels. And that's the core strength of the Coast Guard. I think, aside from being our motto, Semper Paratus, is that we have authority vested down to the lowest levels in the organization. You saw it in Katrina when helicopter pilots started plucking people off roofs of homes in New Orleans, which is another city's, another state's jurisdiction, not the federal jurisdiction. National Guard had to have permission to come in. The Coast Guard didn't. We went right in, and we have those authorities under the law and that culture in our mind. So we operate well independently. And the tools we use, to get back to the question, we have common equipment that is Navy funded, thank goodness, that gets put on our platforms, our surface platforms, like our national security cutters. And that equipment allows us to interoperate with the other services that we relate to. So we have that interoperability, and we have that command authority that is that culture of independent operations.
So if people have more questions, please do put them in the Q&A, because our time is coming to a close. We have a question about my granddaughters are ages 6 to 11. What will the Coast Guard look like 7 years from now that would attract them to a military service career?
Well, they don't have to wait 7 years. They can they can start thinking about it right now. In 7 years, the Coast Guard's going to be even 7 years better than the 40 years that I was in. It's improving constantly if I look at where we're going. And so the opportunities for young women abound in the Coast Guard. I think that there's one thing that always struck me when I was at the Coast Guard Academy. And to go back to Bob Acker's question on life saving, a lot of women are intrigued by that thought of saving lives and protecting. That was me too, a lot of men too, but I think women especially. And at the Academy, I noticed the marine science major was loaded with women, disproportionately more women in that major than men. So women like the idea of the marine science, the environmental protection, the stewardship of the ocean, and preserving those natural resources, and all that is in that mission and major. And so I think the Coast Guard for young women offers so much that can appeal across genders, and can appeal to specifically women with our different mission sets that range anything from decking out in the full combat gear to be on deployable support forces, where you're going to be fast roping, working with the other services, in the way of danger, to taking care of the environment, to saving lives, to going down and monitoring science activities in the Arctic and the Antarctic. So there's a lot to attract young people of all kinds, and especially, I think, young women to the Coast Guard. So I'd encourage them to start looking into it soon.
That's excellent. So we have a lot more comments, but they're more congratulations. So I'd love to read some of those, and then we'll announce who won the book. And we'll thank the Admiral very much for her time today and offer more congratulations. But we have one from Therese Thiedemann, who's the class of '82 classmate. And she just wanted to congratulate on your success and commend you on taking the opportunity to share what you've learned about leadership with your book. And then Robert Acker, of course, says, thanks, Sandy. Linda, to the panel, to you, best of luck on your book. Your experience in the U.S. Coast Guard are an example for what is possible for women in military service. And then Carolyn Abbott, hi, Sandy. Thanks for your examples of leadership and perseverance, all with your trademark positive attitude. Bravo on your book launch, Carolyn Abbott. So those are some nice congratulations. And so we do have, I mean, I don't know if we've queued up a drum roll for the book winner, but the book winner today is Cindy Grace. So we'll be reaching out to Cindy. If you want to raise your hand and say hi, Cindy, we'd love to hear that. And we'll be following up and connecting you with Sandy to get you the signed book. Oh, there she is. There she is raising her hand. Yay. All right. Go, Cindy. I'm glad you'll get a chance to have the book and share it with others. And for the rest of you, please download it today. Come on, let's make it a bestseller. Let's do it. It's up to you.
Go back to leadership development at the James Loy Leadership Development Center at the Coast Guard Academy.
That's right. It's all the money is donated. That's incredible. So again, Admiral, thank you. Thank you for allowing us to partner with you to help get the word out about this tremendous book on leadership. I hope everyone will have it on their shelves, and I'll turn it to you to say the last word.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know I had a last word after saying all those words.
All those words.
Can I have 2 words?
Sure.
Thank you.
Oh, that's awesome. All right, everyone. Well, go make it a great leadership day. Reach your hand out to someone and pull them up with you and make our nation stronger through all of that connection and excellent leadership. We'll have more of these leadership interviews, and we certainly do book launches on a regular basis. So please tune in to HS Today. Everything is free. Always free. We're just here to make the country safer by giving people like Admiral Stowes a platform. So thank you all for what you do, and we will talk to you and see you soon. Take care.